Longevity is having a moment, biological age tests, Ozempic for aging, billionaires trying to reverse the clock. Behind all the hype is real, fascinating science. We now understand aging not as a mystery, but as a set of specific, measurable biological processes. This series cuts through the noise with the evidence. A quick note first, this is educational, not medical advice. Today, the foundation, why we actually age. Let's start by reframing what aging even is. It's tempting to think of aging as a clock counting down, or a single program that switches on. But that's not what the science shows. Aging is better understood as the slow accumulation of molecular and cellular damage over your entire lifetime. Your cells are constantly being injured, by the byproducts of metabolism, by radiation, by the ordinary wear of copying DNA billions of times, and while your body repairs most of it, a little slips through every day and builds up. For decades, that damage stays below the threshold where you'd notice. But eventually it crosses a line, tissues start to fail, and you get the diseases of aging. This is why age itself is the single biggest risk factor for heart disease, cancer, dementia, and nearly everything else. Here's the breakthrough that organized the whole field. In 2013, a group of scientists published a landmark paper that took the messy biology of aging and sorted it into a clean set of distinct processes, the hallmarks of aging. The list was updated in 2023 to 12 hallmarks. Why does this matter so much? Because it turned aging from a vague, single mystery into a list of specific, concrete mechanisms, and a specific mechanism is something you can potentially target. Each hallmark is a possible lever, something a drug or a lifestyle change might slow down, repair, or even reverse. Almost every longevity intervention you'll hear about in this series, from rapamycin to fasting to the new drugs, works by targeting one or more of these 12 hallmarks. So they're worth knowing. You don't need to memorize all 12, but it helps to see them grouped. The first group is damage to the cell's core machinery, instability in the DNA itself, the shortening of protective caps on our chromosomes called telomeres, chemical changes to how genes are switched on and off, and the buildup of misfolded proteins. The second group is the cell's own maintenance systems breaking down, the sensors that track nutrients getting stuck in the wrong mode, the mitochondria, the cell's power plants, becoming inefficient, and the cellular cleanup crews slowing down. And the third group is the wider, system-level problems, cells that stop dividing but refuse to die, called senescent cells, which we'll cover next episode, the exhaustion of the stem cells that replenish our tissues, a slow, chronic background of inflammation, and even imbalances in the gut microbiome. 12 interconnected processes, all pushing in the same direction. Here's why this framework is genuinely hopeful rather than grim. Because the hallmarks are all interconnected, pushing on one often improves several others, inflammation, nutrient sensing, and senescence all feed into each other, so a single good intervention can ripple outward. And crucially, many of these hallmarks respond to things we can actually influence, from exercise to specific drugs now in human trials. It's also important to be clear about the real goal, because the hype gets this wrong. Serious longevity science is not chasing immortality or living to 200. The realistic, evidence-based goal is extending healthspan, the number of years you live in good health, free of disease and disability, rather than just adding frail years at the end. Compressing the sick years, not just stretching the lifespan. That's the honest and genuinely achievable target. So the takeaway that sets up this whole series is this: aging is no longer a black box. It's 12 specific, measurable biological processes, each one a potential target for slowing or reversing the damage. That's a profound shift. It's what turned anti-aging from science fiction into an actual field of medicine with drugs in human trials. Over the rest of this series, we'll take the big hallmarks and the big interventions one at a time: senescent cells, the epigenetic clock, telomeres, rapamycin, metformin, fasting, exercise, and the surprising role of the new weight loss drugs. And every single time, we'll ask the one question that separates science from snake oil: what does the evidence actually show? Because in this field, that question matters more than anywhere else. This is educational, not medical advice. One of the 12 hallmarks of aging has captured more excitement, and more hype, than almost any other: cellular senescence. These are the so-called zombie cells, and clearing them out has become one of the most promising, and most oversold, ideas in longevity. Let's understand what they actually are, why they matter, and what the evidence really says about the drugs that target them. So what is a senescent cell? Normally, when a cell gets too damaged, or has divided so many times that it's worn out, one of two things happens: it either repairs itself, or it self-destructs to get out of the way. But sometimes a third thing happens instead: the cell enters a state called senescence. It stops dividing entirely, but it stubbornly refuses to die. Now, here's the twist: this is originally a good thing, a protective mechanism. A damaged cell that can no longer divide can't go on to become a cancerous tumor. So senescence is one of your body's defenses against cancer. When you're young, your immune system simply clears these cells away, and all is well. The trouble is what happens when they start to pile up. Here's why they earned the nickname zombie cells. A senescent cell doesn't just sit there quietly, harmlessly retired. It actively pumps out a toxic cocktail of inflammatory molecules. Scientists call it the senescence-associated secretory phenotype, or SASP for short. Think of it as a cell that won't die and won't shut up, constantly spewing out inflammatory signals. And that inflammatory soup is genuinely damaging. It injures the healthy cells around it, degrades the surrounding tissue, and, this is the really insidious part, it can push nearby healthy cells into becoming senescent themselves. So they spread, zombie style, one converting the next. As we age, our immune system gets worse at clearing them, so they accumulate in our tissues, and their chronic, low-grade inflammation is now thought to be a major driver of aging itself, contributing to arthritis, heart disease, and frailty. This leads to one of the most exciting ideas in all of longevity science. If these zombie cells drive aging, then what if we could selectively hunt them down and kill them, while leaving the healthy cells alone? Drugs that do this are called senolytics, and the concept is elegant. You don't have to fix the damaged cells, you just clear them out, like weeding a garden. And in mice, the results have been genuinely striking. When researchers use senolytics to clear senescent cells from aging mice, the animals often get measurably healthier, better physical function, healthier tissues, and in some studies, a longer lifespan. Those mouse results are what set off the entire senolytics gold rush, and why you now see companies and clinics promoting these compounds. But, and this is the crucial but, mice are not people. So where does the human evidence actually stand? The most studied senolytic approach in people combines an old cancer drug called dasatinib with a plant compound called quercetin, often abbreviated D+Q, and there's also interest in a supplement called fisetin. And here's the honest picture, which the marketing tends to skip: the human trials so far are small, early, and the results have been decidedly mixed and inconsistent. Some show modest signals, others show little. The dramatic, life-extending magic seen in mice has simply not yet been clearly reproduced in humans, and mouse-to-human translation fails far more often than it succeeds. So the truthful summary is, senolytics are one of the most promising ideas in the field, genuinely worth watching, and also being aggressively sold well ahead of the evidence. If a clinic is offering to clear your zombie cells today, that's hope being marketed as fact. This is educational, not medical advice. You have two ages. One is your chronological age, the candles on your birthday cake. The other is your biological age, how old your body actually is at the cellular level, which can be years older or younger. The tools that measure this, called epigenetic clocks, are one of the most important and hyped developments in longevity. Let's understand how they work, and how much to trust them. To understand these clocks, you first need one idea: epigenetics. Your DNA is the hardware, the fixed sequence of letters you're born with, which barely changes across your whole life. But sitting on top of that DNA is a layer of chemical marks that act like software, switching individual genes on and off in each cell. The most studied of these are called methylation marks, small chemical tags attached to the DNA. Here's the crucial discovery: as you age, the pattern of these methylation marks changes across your genome in a remarkably predictable, clock-like way. Certain spots gain marks, others lose them, and they do so on a consistent schedule. That predictability is everything, because if a pattern changes on a reliable schedule, you can read it backward to estimate age. So how does the clock actually work? Scientists took DNA methylation data from thousands of people of known ages and used machine learning to find the specific set of marks that, together, best predict a person's age. That trained model is the epigenetic clock. Now you can take a sample, usually blood or saliva, read its methylation pattern, feed it into the clock, and out comes a number: your biological age. And here's what makes it powerful and a little unsettling. If your biological age comes out higher than your actual birthday age, it suggests your body is aging faster than average. If it comes out lower, you're aging more slowly than the calendar says. It's an attempt to measure not how long you've lived, but how worn your biology actually is. For a field that struggled for decades to measure aging at all, that's a genuine breakthrough. There isn't just one clock, there are several, and they measure subtly different things. The original, from 2013, is often called Horvath's clock, after the scientist who built it, and it's foundational. Then came more refined versions. GrimAge is trained not on age but on time-to-death data, which makes it currently the strongest single predictor of mortality risk. PhenoAge blends methylation marks with standard clinical blood markers for a more health-focused read. And a particularly clever one, Dunedin Pace, doesn't give you a static age at all, it estimates your current rate of aging, measured in biological years per calendar year. A healthy person might score around 9/10, meaning they age slower than the calendar. An unhealthy person might score 1.2, aging faster. Because it measures your pace right now, Dunedin Pace is the most responsive to whether an intervention is actually working. Now the honest caveats, because this is where hype runs wild. First, precision. These clocks are superb for studying populations and research, but for an individual consumer test, they can be surprisingly noisy. The very same DNA sample, tested twice, can give meaningfully different numbers, and results vary between labs. So a single reading is a rough estimate, not a precise verdict on your body. Second, and more important, the clocks show correlation, not proven causation. We know that a higher biological age is associated with worse health outcomes. But it has not yet been proven that if you take an intervention and your clock number goes down, you'll actually live longer or healthier as a result. The clock might be a readout of aging without being the thing that, when changed, changes your fate. So use these as an interesting trend to track over time, not a scoreboard to obsess over, and be deeply skeptical of anything promising to reverse your epigenetic age. This is educational, not medical advice. Telomeres are maybe the most famous concept in all of aging science, the protective caps on your chromosomes that shorten every time a cell divides, like a countdown timer to old age. It's a beautiful, intuitive story, and it won a Nobel Prize. It's also one of the most oversimplified and oversold ideas in the whole field. Let's separate the real science from the supplement marketing. Let's build the real picture first. Your DNA is bundled into structures called chromosomes, and on the end of each chromosome sits a protective cap called a telomere. The classic analogy is the little plastic tip on the end of a shoelace, the aglet, that stops the lace from fraying. Telomeres do the same job for your chromosomes, protecting the important genetic information from damage. Now here's the key mechanical fact. Every single time a cell divides, it has to copy all of its DNA, and the copying machinery has a quirk, it can't quite reach all the way to the very end of the strand. So a tiny bit of telomere is lost with each division. The caps get shorter and shorter over a lifetime of cell divisions. It's a genuine, elegant, real phenomenon, and you can see why it captured everyone's imagination as a countdown clock for aging. So what happens when the countdown runs down? When a cell's telomeres get critically short, the cell recognizes the danger, its genetic information is now at risk, and it stops dividing. Often, it enters exactly the senescent, zombie cell state we covered 2 episodes ago, or it self-destructs. This creates a built-in limit on how many times most of our cells can divide, sometimes called the Hayflick limit. And as our tissues run low on cells that can still divide and replenish, they struggle to repair and renew, a real contributor to aging. But here's a crucial nuance that the hype ignores: this limit is also one of our most important defenses against cancer. A cancer cell's whole trick is dividing endlessly and out of control, and short telomeres are a natural break that stops damaged cells from doing exactly that. Which is why simply lengthening telomeres is not the obvious win it sounds like. This brings us to the trap at the heart of the telomere hype. There is an enzyme called telomerase that can actually rebuild and lengthen telomeres. Our stem cells and reproductive cells use it. So the dream is obvious: just switch telomerase on everywhere, rebuild everyone's caps, and reset the aging clock. Simple, right? Here's the catch, and it's a big one. Cancer cells have already figured out this exact trick. The vast majority of cancers reactivate telomerase precisely so they can divide forever and become immortal. That's a core part of what makes them cancer. So broadly cranking up telomerase throughout the body risks handing damaged, precancerous cells the very tool they need to become tumors. That's not a hypothetical worry, it's a central reason this approach is so tricky. So when you see supplements marketed as telomere activators or telomerase boosters promising to reverse aging, be deeply skeptical. The biology is genuinely not that simple, and longer is not automatically better. This is educational, not medical advice. So let's land this honestly. Telomere shortening is absolutely real, it's one of the 12 hallmarks of aging, and on average, people with shorter telomeres do tend to have worse health. The science is genuine and Nobel-worthy. But telomeres are one thread in a 12-part tapestry, not the single master switch that the supplement industry wants you to believe. Aging is not simply telomeres running out, and you cannot buy your way to youth by lengthening them in a bottle. What's genuinely encouraging is that the boring fundamentals help here too. Regular exercise, not smoking, a good diet, and managing chronic stress are all associated with healthier telomere maintenance, no expensive supplement required. Telomeres are a beautiful piece of biology, and a cautionary tale about how easily real science gets twisted into marketing. This is educational, not medical advice. If you ask longevity scientists which drug has the strongest evidence for extending lifespan, many will give the same answer: rapamycin. It's not a supplement, it's a real, FDA-approved medication that reliably extends life in animals across the board. But it comes with genuine trade-offs and unanswered questions. Let's look at the most promising, and most carefully watched, longevity drug there is. To understand rapamycin, you have to meet a molecule called mTOR, one of the 12 hallmarks in action: deregulated nutrient sensing. Think of mTOR as a master switch deep inside your cells that constantly senses how much food, especially protein, is around. When nutrients are plentiful, when you're well fed, mTOR flips on and sends a clear message: times are good, grow, divide, build new stuff. That's essential when you're a growing child. But here's the catch. That same aggressive growth signal, running full blast for decades in adulthood, appears to accelerate aging. When mTOR quiets down instead, during fasting or scarcity, cells switch into a maintenance and repair mode, including a cleanup process called autophagy, where they recycle their own damaged parts. And that maintenance mode is strongly linked to longevity. So the growth switch, stuck on, may be aging us. So here's where rapamycin comes in. Rapamycin is a drug, originally discovered in soil bacteria from Easter Island, and already used in medicine to prevent organ transplant rejection, that directly inhibits mTOR. In other words, it chemically tricks the cell into the maintain and repair, nutrient scarcity mode, switching on that cellular cleanup, without you having to actually starve yourself. And the animal evidence is remarkable. Rapamycin is the single most reproducible life-extending drug we have ever found. It extends lifespan in yeast, in worms, in flies, and, most importantly, in mice, even when given late in life. Very few interventions work that consistently across so many species. That track record is exactly why it sits at the top of the serious longevity research agenda, and why it's not lumped in with the supplement hype. This is a real drug with real, repeated results. So does it work in people? Here we have to be honest, the human longevity evidence is still early, but it's the most developed of any longevity drug. The most notable study, the Pearl trial, published in 2025, gave low-dose rapamycin to healthy adults over 48 weeks and tracked a broad range of health span measures. It gave the field its best human data yet, though the effects were modest and the picture is still emerging. And there's a real trade-off to respect. Rapamycin is, at higher doses, an immune suppressant. That's literally its job in transplant patients. Suppress the immune system too much and you're more vulnerable to infection, which is the opposite of what you want. The entire longevity strategy hinges on using low, intermittent doses, say, once a week, hoping to capture the anti-aging benefits while avoiding the immune downside. That balance is exactly what current trials are trying to nail down. So rapamycin is genuinely the most promising longevity drug, with a real asterisk. It's experimental, off-label, has side effects, and is absolutely not something to self-prescribe. This is educational, not medical advice. Metformin is a cheap, generic diabetes drug taken by millions, and it became an unlikely longevity celebrity. The story of the trial designed to test it for aging, called TAME, is one of the most revealing tales in the whole field, a story about promising science, and about how the economics of medicine can stall even the best ideas. Let's unpack it. So why did a humble diabetes pill become a longevity darling? Metformin has been around for decades, it's extremely cheap, and it has a long, well-established safety record lowering blood sugar in type 2 diabetes. But then researchers noticed something genuinely intriguing. In some large observational studies, people with diabetes who were taking metformin appeared to outlive people without diabetes who weren't taking it. Read that again, the diabetics on the drug seem to do better than healthy people off it. That's a startling hint that metformin might be doing something beyond just controlling blood sugar, that it might be tapping into the aging process itself. Mechanistically, that's plausible. Metformin nudges the same nutrient sensing and metabolic pathways, including a fuel sensor called AMPK, that fasting and caloric restriction act on. It's a metabolic drug that looks a bit like calorie restriction in a pill. This led to a landmark proposal, a trial called TAME, which stands for Targeting Aging with Metformin. And its design was genuinely clever, because it tried to solve a deep problem. You can't easily run a longevity trial with lifespan as the endpoint, you'd have to wait decades for people to die, which is impractical. So TAME reframed the question. Instead of measuring lifespan, it would measure whether metformin delays the onset of a whole cluster of age-related diseases, heart disease, cancer, dementia, all at once. The idea was that if one cheap drug can push back many diseases of aging simultaneously, then it must be acting on aging itself. Even more importantly, TAME was designed to get regulators to formally recognize aging as a treatable condition, a target you could actually run trials against. That would have opened the door for the entire field. It was as much a regulatory strategy as a science experiment. And here's the twist that makes this story so revealing. As of 2026, the famous TAME trial has never actually enrolled a single participant. Years after it was proposed, it remains stalled, unfunded. Why? Not because the science was debunked, but because of pure economics. Metformin is off patent and costs pennies. That means no pharmaceutical company can make money by proving it extends healthspan, anyone could sell the generic. So the enormous bill to run a rigorous, large-scale trial has no obvious commercial sponsor willing to pay it. It's a stark illustration of a real flaw in how we fund medicine. A promising, cheap, potentially world-changing intervention can languish precisely because nobody can profit from it. Interestingly, governments have started stepping in. A large publicly funded trial called VitalH is now testing other agents, including rapamycin and semaglutide, for aging. The science moves forward, just not always through the drug it started with. So what's the honest bottom line on metformin? Its longevity reputation rests mostly on observational studies and animal data, suggestive, genuinely interesting, but not the same as proof. The definitive human trial that would settle it, TAME, hasn't happened. It may well offer a modest health span benefit, especially for people with metabolic issues, but we can't yet say that with confidence for healthy people. And there's an important wrinkle worth knowing. Some recent research suggests metformin may actually blunt some of the muscle and fitness gains you get from exercise, and as we'll see, exercise is the most proven longevity tool there is. So taking metformin to fight aging while undercutting your workouts could be self-defeating. The metformin story is a perfect microcosm of this whole field, real promise, incomplete evidence, and a lot of people already taking it based on hope rather than proof. This is educational, not medical advice. If you've wandered into the longevity world, you've seen the letters NAD, and the supplements NMN and NR promising to restore your youthful energy. This is a multi-billion-dollar corner of the industry, built on some genuinely real science, and a lot of premature marketing. This episode is a case study in how to think about longevity supplements, using the most popular one of all. Let's separate the molecule from the marketing. Let's start with the real science, because there genuinely is some. NAD, technically NAD+, is a molecule present in every single cell of your body, and it's absolutely essential to life. It plays a starring role in turning the food you eat into usable energy inside your mitochondria, and it's also the fuel for a family of critical repair and maintenance enzymes, including the famous sirtuins that help protect your DNA. So NAD is genuinely important. And here's the observation that launched the whole field: NAD levels decline substantially as we age, older tissues simply have less of it. That decline has been linked to the mitochondrial dysfunction and reduced cellular repair that characterize aging. So the logic seems airtight: NAD is vital, NAD falls with age, therefore restore NAD and you might restore youthful function. It's a compelling story, and it's why the supplements exist. So how do the supplements try to fix this? You can't just swallow NAD directly and have it reach your cells efficiently. The molecule is too big and gets broken down. So instead, the supplements provide precursors, smaller building block molecules that your body then assembles into NAD. The two big ones are NMN and NR, nicotinamide mononucleotide and nicotinamide riboside. And here's the part that's genuinely established: they work at the first step. Multiple human trials have shown that taking NMN or NR reliably raises NAD levels in the blood, and importantly, they appear to be safe and well tolerated, at least in the studies done so far. So the marketing claim that these supplements boost your NAD is, narrowly, true. The problem, and it's the whole problem, is the leap from there to boost your NAD and you'll age slower. That leap is where the evidence gets thin. Here's the crucial gap, and it's the lesson that applies to almost every longevity supplement. Raising a number in your blood is not the same as making you healthier or younger. Yes, these supplements raise NAD levels, but do the people taking them actually live longer, or healthier? The honest answer is, we don't know, and the current human evidence is preliminary at best. The trials done so far are small and short, showing only modest, inconsistent signals on things like insulin sensitivity, muscle performance, or vascular markers, nothing remotely definitive, nothing proving they slow aging. The truly dramatic results, the ones you see quoted, increased lifespan, restored youthful function, come overwhelmingly from mice. And as we keep seeing in this series, what works spectacularly in a mouse very often does nothing in a human. So when you buy an NAD booster, understand exactly what you're buying: a safe, plausible hypothesis, sold at a premium as if it were an established result. That gap, between plausible and proven, is the entire longevity supplement industry in a nutshell. This is educational, not medical advice. Long before rapamycin or NAD supplements, scientists knew one intervention that reliably extended life in the lab: simply eating less. Caloric restriction is the oldest and most robust anti-aging finding there is, and fasting is its trendy modern cousin. But the story in humans is more nuanced than the influencers suggest. Let's look at what eating less actually does, and doesn't, do. Let's start with just how old and solid this finding is. All the way back in the 1930s, researchers discovered something remarkable: if you feed lab animals significantly fewer calories, typically 20 to 40% less than normal, while still giving them all the vitamins and nutrients they need, so they're undernourished in calories but not malnourished, they live dramatically longer. And not just longer, but healthier, with less cancer and less age-related disease. This has been replicated over and over, across an astonishing range of species: yeast, worms, flies, mice, rats. Very few findings in all of biology are this consistent and this durable. So caloric restriction is the closest thing aging science has to a rock-solid law: eat meaningfully less, and lab animals age slower. The obvious question is why, and the answer connects back to everything we've covered. So why does eating less slow aging? Because it pulls the exact same biological levers that the longevity drugs are trying to mimic, which is a beautiful piece of unity in this field. When calories are scarce, your cells sense it. That master growth switch mTOR, from the rapamycin episode, quiets down. Insulin signaling drops. A fuel-sensing enzyme called AMPK, the same one metformin nudges, switches on. And critically, the cell ramps up autophagy, its internal recycling and cleanup program, chewing up damaged proteins and worn-out components and reusing them. In short, scarcity sends your body a message: this isn't the time to grow and reproduce, it's the time to hunker down, maintain, and repair. And that maintenance and repair state is, essentially, the anti-aging state. Rapamycin, metformin, and fasting are all, in a sense, different routes to the same destination, convincing your cells that food is scarce so they switch into repair mode. Now, constantly eating 30% less for your whole life is miserable and, frankly, almost nobody can sustain it. Enter the modern, more practical cousin: intermittent fasting, and time-restricted eating. The idea is to get the benefits of scarcity by cycling, periods of eating and periods of not eating, rather than permanent restriction. Popular versions include eating only within an 8-hour window each day, or fasting for longer stretches occasionally. And there's real science here. Fasting does reliably trigger that autophagy cleanup process, and it can improve metabolic markers like blood sugar and insulin sensitivity. But here's an honest nuance the influencers often gloss over. A good chunk of fasting's benefit may simply come from the fact that when you restrict your eating window, you tend to eat fewer total calories. In other words, some of the magic might just be plain old eating less, repackaged. The special metabolic effects beyond that are real but more modest than the hype suggests. So does this translate to humans? Here's the honest picture. The major human trial of caloric restriction, called Caloric, asked healthy people to cut 25% of their calories, and in practice they only managed about 12% over 2 years, because sustained restriction is genuinely hard. Even so, it improved their metabolic markers and reduced biomarkers of cellular senescence, which is encouraging. But, and this matters, humans on caloric restriction do not show the lifespan doubling that mice do. We're not going to live to 150 by eating less. And severe restriction carries real risks: muscle and bone loss, low energy, weakened immunity, disordered eating, and it's outright dangerous for some people. So the honest takeaway is that mild caloric moderation and sensible time-restricted eating are reasonable, evidence-supported tools, but extreme restriction is not clearly better for humans and can do harm. Don't starve yourself chasing mouse results. This is educational, not medical advice. Talk to a doctor before starting any fasting regimen. After episodes on exotic drugs, epigenetic clocks, and expensive supplements, here's the most important episode of the series, and the least glamorous. If there were a single intervention with overwhelming, proven evidence for extending health span, it wouldn't be a pill or an injection. It's exercise. No drug in development comes close. Let's look at why physical activity is, by a wide margin, the most powerful longevity tool we have. Let's start with why this episode outranks all the others. Everything else in this series, rapamycin, senolytics, NAD, fasting, rests on animal studies, small human trials, or preliminary data. Exercise is different. The evidence that physical activity extends health span and lifespan is genuinely overwhelming, built on enormous studies following millions of people across decades. This is about as close to settled science as it gets in human health. Regular physical activity is associated with a large, consistent reduction in death from all causes: heart disease, cancer, dementia, you name it. If exercise were a pill, it would be the most valuable drug ever invented, and every longevity clinic would be built around it. The effect is bigger, and vastly better proven, than any of the trendy longevity drugs. That's not an exaggeration, it's what the data plainly shows. So the single most evidence-based thing in this entire series is also the most ordinary. So why does exercise work so broadly? Because, remarkably, it hits nearly every one of the 12 hallmarks of aging at the same time. Think back through the series. Exercise builds new, healthy mitochondria and improves the function of existing ones, directly countering mitochondrial dysfunction. It powerfully reduces the chronic inflammation, the inflammagen, that senescent cells drive. It stimulates autophagy, that cellular cleanup process. It improves insulin sensitivity and nutrient sensing, the same pathways fasting and metformin target. It supports stem cell function and even appears to benefit telomere maintenance. In other words, exercise does, for free and safely, much of what all those individual experimental drugs are each trying to do one at a time. It's a whole-body, multi-hallmark intervention that no single pill can match. When people ask longevity researchers what they personally do, the answer is almost never a fancy drug first, it's that they exercise, without fail. So what kind of exercise matters most? Two pillars stand out. The first is strength training. Building and preserving muscle turns out to be one of the strongest predictors of healthy aging. Muscle keeps you metabolically healthy, protects against falls, and preserves your independence in old age. The gradual loss of muscle with age, called sarcopenia, is a major reason people become frail, and resistance training directly fights it. The second pillar is cardiovascular fitness. Your VO2 max, a measure of how well your body uses oxygen during hard effort, is one of the single best predictors of longevity we have. Higher cardio fitness strongly tracks with a longer life. But here's the most encouraging part: you don't need to be an athlete. Even simply moving more, walking regularly, taking the stairs, and avoiding long unbroken stretches of sitting, delivers large benefits. And it is genuinely never too late. Starting exercise in your 50s, 60s, or beyond still adds healthy, independent years. So here's the takeaway, and it's the most important one in the series. The most powerful, most thoroughly proven anti-aging intervention that exists is not for sale in a bottle, not offered at an exclusive clinic, and not a molecule in a trial. It's exercise, a combination of strength training and cardiovascular fitness, and it's available to essentially everyone, for free. There's a real irony in the longevity world. People will spend thousands of dollars on unproven supplements and biological age tests while neglecting the one intervention with overwhelming evidence behind it. So if you take just one thing from this whole series, let it be this: before you spend a single dollar on a longevity supplement or clinic, the highest return move you can make, by far, is simply to move, consistently, for the rest of your life. That's the real longevity secret, and it's hiding in plain sight. This is educational, not medical advice. The blue zones, a handful of regions where people supposedly live extraordinarily long lives, have become one of the most popular ideas in longevity, spawning books, diets, and Netflix specials. There's genuine wisdom in them. But there's also a growing, uncomfortable scientific debate about how real the data actually is. Let's give the blue zones an honest look, the inspiration and the skepticism. Let's start with the appealing story. The blue zones are a set of 5 regions around the world that were identified as having an unusually high concentration of centenarians, people living to 100 and beyond. The famous ones include the island of Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Ikaria in Greece, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and a community in Loma Linda, California. The idea, popularized in a best-selling book, was irresistible. If we could find places where people reliably live to extreme old age, we could study their lives, find what they have in common, and copy it. So researchers went in looking for the shared lifestyle threads that might explain why these particular populations seem to age so gracefully. And they did find some consistent, sensible patterns. The lifestyle patterns the blue zones researchers highlighted are, honestly, good advice regardless of the data debate. People in these regions tended to eat mostly plant-based diets, lots of beans, vegetables, and whole foods, with meat as an occasional treat rather than a staple, and they tended not to overeat. They got constant natural movement woven into daily life, gardening, walking up hills, manual work, not gym sessions, but bodies in motion all day. They had strong social ties, tight families, close-knit communities, and older people who stayed valued and connected rather than isolated. And they had a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, along with lower chronic stress. Notice that these line up beautifully with real science, the value of a plant-rich diet, of constant movement, and, genuinely underrated, of social connection, because loneliness measurably harms health. As general life advice, it's hard to argue with any of it. Now for the uncomfortable part that the books and documentaries tend to skip. In recent years, researchers digging into the actual data behind extreme age claims have raised serious, provocative doubts. When you carefully examine records of people claimed to be 110 or older, a striking pattern emerges. Many of these cases turn out to trace back to errors, missing or unreliable birth certificates, clerical mistakes, and, in some documented cases, pension fraud, where a death simply went unreported so the payments kept coming. One prominent analysis found that regions with lots of supposedly extreme-aged people often correlated not with healthy living, but with poor record-keeping and higher poverty, exactly the conditions where ages get recorded wrong. This doesn't mean the blue zones are entirely fake, but it does mean the headline claims of extraordinary longevity may be significantly inflated by bad data. It's a genuine, active scientific controversy, and a healthy reminder to be skeptical of extraordinary claims, even beloved ones. So how do we hold both things at once? Here's the honest, useful takeaway. The specific claim that these exact 5 regions are magical longevity hotspots is genuinely under scientific dispute, and the extreme age numbers may be inflated by unreliable records. Be skeptical of the mythology. But, and this is the key, the lifestyle lessons drawn from them don't actually depend on the blue zones being real. Eating mostly plants, staying physically active all day, maintaining strong social bonds, keeping a sense of purpose, and not overeating are all independently backed by solid, separate science. They're good ideas whether or not anyone in Sardinia is truly 107. So the mature approach is to take the sensible, well-supported lifestyle advice, which happens to echo everything else in this series, while holding the romantic blue zone story itself lightly. Good habits, real science, magical villages, be skeptical. This is educational, not medical advice. The drugs everyone knows as weight loss medications, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, may turn out to have a second, bigger story, as longevity drugs. It sounds like hype, but this one is grounded in a striking, serious scientific case, and it ties together nearly everything in this series. If you watched our metabolic series, this is the sequel. Let's look at why GLP-1s might be the most important accidental longevity drugs of the decade. Let's pick up where the metabolic series left off. The GLP-1 drugs, semaglutide and tirzepatide, sold as Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound, were designed to treat diabetes and drive weight loss by mimicking a gut hormone that quiets appetite. That much everyone knows. But as the big clinical trials rolled in, something unexpected emerged. The benefits reached far beyond the number on the scale. These drugs were shown to significantly reduce heart attacks and strokes, to slow the progression of kidney disease, and to lower inflammation throughout the body, and intriguingly, some of these benefits appeared even beyond what the weight loss alone could explain. That's the clue that got aging researchers paying close attention. A drug that protects the heart, the kidneys, and the brain, and lowers systemic inflammation, isn't just treating obesity, it might be acting on something more fundamental. It might be acting on aging itself. Here's the claim that made headlines in 2026. A comprehensive scientific review concluded that GLP-1 receptor agonists appear to influence all 12 of the hallmarks of aging we laid out in episode 1. Think about how significant that framing is. These drugs reduce chronic inflammation, inflammaging. They improve mitochondrial function and metabolic health. They appear to quiet that master growth switch mTOR and mimic some of the signals of caloric restriction, the same pathways as rapamycin and fasting. And in animal studies, semaglutide has even been shown to reduce cellular senescence, clearing out some of those zombie cells. Recall the lesson from our very first episode, because the hallmarks are interconnected, a true anti-aging intervention would be one that hits many of them at once. And that is exactly the profile these drugs are showing. It's a genuinely serious scientific case, not just marketing, that GLP-1s may be acting as broad geroprotective drugs, almost by accident. Now let's stay honest, because this is a channel that doesn't oversell. As exciting as the all-hallmark story is, it's still early. Much of the direct anti-aging evidence is mechanistic, how the drugs work in cells, or comes from animal studies. We do not yet have the long-term human trials proving that GLP-1s extend healthspan in otherwise healthy, non-diabetic people. That's exactly what large trials like the government-funded VITAL-H study, testing semaglutide for aging, are now trying to find out. And there are real open questions to weigh. Rapid weight loss on these drugs can include muscle loss, which, as our exercise episode stressed, is the opposite of healthy aging, so preserving muscle matters. There are questions of cost, of access, and of what it means to take a drug like this for decades. So hold this one as genuinely promising and scientifically serious, but not proven. These are still prescription medicines for specific conditions, not a validated anti-aging pill for healthy people. This is educational, not medical advice. So here's the takeaway, and why this episode matters so much for the future. If the longevity effects of GLP-1 drugs hold up in rigorous human trials, and that's a real if, they could become the first widely prescribed, mass-market drugs that measurably slow aging in people. Not an obscure compound taken by a few biohackers, but medicines already in tens of millions of medicine cabinets. That would be a genuine turning point for the entire field. And it would validate the core thesis we started with in episode 1, that if you target the shared, underlying biology of aging, you can push back many age-related diseases at the same time, which is exactly what these drugs seem to do across the heart, kidneys, brain, and metabolism. Whether or not GLP-1 specifically prove to be the answer, they may be the proof of concept that aging is a treatable target. That's a genuinely hopeful place for this science to be. This is educational, not medical advice. We'll close this series with the most valuable thing it can give you, a clear-eyed way to tell longevity science from longevity selling. This field is a strange mix of genuine, thrilling breakthroughs and shameless snake oil, often sold side by side by the same people. So let's build your honest scorecard, what the evidence actually supports, what's promising but unproven, and how to protect yourself from the hype. Start with the single most useful mental tool, the evidence pyramid. Not all scientific evidence carries the same weight, and knowing the difference is your best defense. At the bottom of the pyramid, the weakest tier, is a plausible mechanism, a story about how something could work, or a result in simple organisms like yeast or worms. Interesting, but a long way from proof. In the middle sits the mouse, results in rodents, which are more meaningful but famously fail to translate to humans most of the time. And at the very top, the gold standard, are large, long, randomized controlled trials in actual humans, the only thing that truly proves an intervention works in people. Here's the trick the longevity industry pulls, over and over: it takes a finding from the bottom of the pyramid, a mechanism, or a mouse study, and sells it to you as if it were established human fact. Once you can spot that move, you can see through most of the hype instantly. So let's put everything from this series onto one honest scorecard. In the top tier, backed by strong human evidence, are the things that are frankly unglamorous and mostly free: regular exercise, the clear winner, along with not smoking, getting good sleep, eating a mostly plant-rich diet, maintaining strong social connections, and keeping your blood pressure and metabolic health in check. That's the proven longevity toolkit, full stop. In the promising but unproven tier sit the genuinely serious research bets: rapamycin, senolytics, GLP-1 drugs for aging, and moderate caloric restriction, real science, worth watching, not yet proven in healthy humans. In the real molecule but thin proof tier are the NAD boosters like NMN and most anti-aging supplements, safe, plausible, but not shown to extend human health span. And in the mostly hyped tier are the reverse your age supplements, the telomere activators, and the expensive unvalidated clinic protocols. Same field, wildly different evidence. So how do you protect yourself and your wallet in practice? Run any longevity claim through 3 simple questions. First, is the evidence actually in humans, or just in mice and cells? If it's not human, it's a hypothesis, not a fact. Second, is it from a real randomized trial, or just a plausible mechanism and a compelling story? Third, and maybe most important, who profits from you believing this? Be at your most skeptical when the person citing the exciting study is also the person selling you the supplement, the test, or the clinic visit. That conflict of interest is everywhere in this field. And watch for the classic tells of hype: promises to reverse aging, single-molecule magic bullets, urgency and secrecy, and testimonials standing in for trials. Real science is cautious, hedged, and boring-sounding. The louder and more certain the longevity claim, the more skeptical you should generally be. Confidence is a marketing tactic, humility is usually the sign of real science. So let's end with the 2 truths that, held together, give you the honest state of this field. The exciting truth: aging is no longer a mystery or a fantasy, it's a real, targetable branch of science, with drugs in human trials and genuine breakthroughs plausibly on the horizon. Rapamycin and the GLP-1 drugs, in particular, are worth watching closely. This may be the decade the first real anti-aging medicines arrive. That's thrilling, and it's earned. But the grounding truth, the one to actually live by, is this: the proven path to a longer, healthier life isn't for sale. It's the basics, done consistently: move your body, especially build muscle, eat mostly plants, sleep well, stay connected to people, don't smoke, and manage your blood pressure and metabolic health. That's not exciting, and nobody profits much from telling you, which is exactly why it gets drowned out. Everything beyond it is, for now, a bet, some promising, some pure hype. Master the basics first, watch the real science with curiosity, and keep your skepticism switched on. Thank you for watching this series on the science of aging. This is educational, not medical advice.